So our lead this hour comes from the Courtroom. You know I am an absolute sucker. I say this all the time, but these legal stories, I can't get enough. Can't get enough. Wonderful. So we've had several new developments in the neutron bomb scandal that has rocked the NFL to its very core. Is that overly dramatic? Did I sell it right? So it is time now for what is going to become, over the next at least couple of months, our obligatory MALLER monologue on the Brian Flores class action civil rights lawsuit, claiming everyone in the NFL who owns a team is a racist, according to the lawsuit, based on the information in that suit. So have you been taking notes? Maybe not. So when we last spoke, let me get you caught up to speed here. Think of this as the Cliff Notes version. So when we last talked, Brian Flores had made the rounds on television, and he had all the big New York City TV shows there bouncing around in a car service, and the attempt was obvious. We mentioned it. There's some videos of those monologues online right now, but to curry sympathy from the undecided viewer, like your favorite politician on a Sunday morning doing all the political shows. Well, Brian Flores was doing all the liberal news shows, trying to get people to back him up, right? Do all that CBS, NBC, MSNBC, all that stuff. The great injustice. And very upset, and he thinks the Giants are racist and they didn't hire him, blah, 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 blah. Now, since that point, we have had several new developments. So let me get you caught up to speed on this. So the Giants came back throwing a haymaker, vehemently defending their integrity, the integrity of the franchise and the head coaching process, the legitimacy of that. They issued a prepared statement, said Brian Flores has raised serious issues in the filing of this complaint, or his complaint, rather, the Giants said in that prepared statement. The specific claims against the Giants and Mr. Flores' allegations about the legitimacy of his candidacy for our head coaching position are disturbing and simply false. And that was just the beginning, and we'll dig a little bit deeper. I've got my shovel out, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper, you and I. So let us discuss the question as we walk you through this. How damaging is the Giants' rebuttal to Brian Flores? So it depends who you believe. If you're on Team Flores, you think all these other NFL people are lying. If you're on the side of the NFL, then you say, well, this is great. If you're somewhere in the middle, I guess that's the person I don't know. But here's the way I look at this. You know, how damaging is the Giants' rebuttal to Brian Flores? Where I sit, it's the nunchucks to the kneecaps is what it is. So I've got open heart surgery, bug-eyed, and Dunder Mifflin. And we will tie all of these things together, and that will be the opening foundation. We're going to put the foundation down for this MALLER monologue. So, A, listen, Brian Flores, he did not have a good day. Brian Flores and his lawyers did not have a good day. He began, after the lawsuit, spent the 24 hours playing softball with talking heads who were like, oh, ooh, yes, very sympathetic on the boob tube. So the NFL then came back and said, okay, here's a little chin music, a little preview of future attractions. And the Giants statement, well, the TV guys, the talking heads that wear the makeup, they were very accommodating. The Giants statement was a 99-mile-an-hour fastball. Some high cheese. Now, why is that? I'll tell you why. Because they performed, the Giants, in that release, open heart surgery on the heart and soul of Brian Flores' lawsuit. While it's 58 pages, the opening salvo, you always start with the most important thing. The opening salvo was the key element, the part of the lawsuit where Brian Flores claims that a former friend of his, that he spent many years working aside, Bill Bellichick, that text exchange, which he made public, violating the bubble of trust, that Brian Flores claims that right there shows you that Bellichick, that text, when he thought he was supposedly texting Brian Daboll, who became the Giants coach, congratulating him on getting the gig, well, the ex-Giants coach said that was before he had even interviewed for the Giants job. It's right there at the very beginning of the lawsuit. You can read it online. And that was the smoking gun. That was the blood at the crime scene. Right there. Boom. Unfortunately for Flores and his lawyers, the surgical precision the Giants used ended up vaporizing Flores' lawsuit. Now, obviously, they're going to have, if it goes to court, they'll have the opportunity to say whether or not the Giants actually have the physical evidence they claim to have. But the Giants said in their statement, they went on to say there's an additional concrete and objective evidence to substantiate that the Giants did not make the decision until the evening of the 28th of January. The allegation, this is right out of the Giants' release, the allegation that the Giants' decision had been made prior to Friday evening, January 28th, is false. And to base that allegation on a text exchange the Giants wrote with Bill Bellichick, in which he ultimately states that he, in quote, thinks Brian Daboll would get the job, is irresponsible. So the Giants called Brian Flores irresponsible. And quote continues here. This was from the statement. The text exchange occurred the day before Coach Daboll's in-person interview even took place. Now, Giants ownership, it goes on to say, would never hire a head coach based on only a 20-minute Zoom interview. You'd like to think that, but there are stupid people who run big companies. Anyway, quote continues, which is all the Giants say that Mr. Daboll had at that point. And there's one more part of this I want to share with you. It says, in addition, Mr. Bellichick does not speak for and has no affiliation with the Giants. See, that right there is going to sink Brian Flores' battleship on this claim. So you're telling me an employee of the Patriots told you that the Giants are going to hire a coach. Okay. It says Mr. Belichick's text exchange proves no insight into what actually transpired during our head coaching search, close quote from the Giants release. And say it with me now. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That was very organized. That was very businesslike. The key part of that is that they have additional concrete and objective evidence to substantiate their claims. See, all Brian Flores has is the text, which he made public, at least as far as we know, unless there's something else in there that we don't know about. But that is not going well for him. That's a bad day. Now, part B of this, we pointed this out in a previous episode, that Brian Flores' lawsuit, when it first happened, and it's only been a couple of days, jaw-dropping, stupefying for those of us that pay attention to this bullcrap, astonishing, eye-opening, all of those big words. But then you take 3 steps back, and it's a friendly reminder. You're like, okay, let me read this. I read it, and some people got upset with me because I was like, well, there's not much here. I don't see a lot. And then people go, oh, you're just a hater, you're whatever. I was like, well, I've read a lot of these lawsuits, and just nothing stood out. But you can sue almost anyone. Think of this as a public service announcement. You can sue almost anyone for almost anything. There's a guy, I don't know if he's still around. He was in prison in, I think it was South Carolina or North Carolina, one of the Carolinas. And this guy would just send out lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. It was all frivolous, but you can sue. You can claim anything. And good luck. The better question, though, is not whether or not you have the ability to sue. It's whether or not you have a viable case. Can you win the case? And that is the part of the Brian Flores story at this point. Now, there might be something else that we don't know about, but based on what we know right now, you get bug-eyed. And you're like, okay. And it's not what you think you know. It's what you can prove in court. That's the problem. And Brian Flores' lawsuit is based on, in the colloquial sense, hearsay, meaning secondhand information. Very difficult, almost impossible to win in an actual courtroom. Now, you can win on social media because a lot of dumb people on social media. A lot of people don't understand how this works. That the courtroom is not a Twitter app or Instagram or whatever. That it's a little different. The standard's a little different. So without even going to court, the Giants, if proven true that they actually have physical evidence, you would think they would, the Giants have harpooned the Bill Belichick part of the case for Brian Flores. Now, the last word here. So this is going to continue, and that's why I'm very excited. I was like, what's going to carry us once football ends? I don't know if we still got the Super Bowl and I guess the Fugazi Pro Bowl this weekend, but what's going to carry us after this? Well, we've got the Deshaun Watson trial to look forward to, and now we have this court case with Brian Flores. So we're going to be like the Courtroom here on Fox Sports Radio late at night, breaking down these stories. But it's going to be a thrill ride. But Brian Flores' story, because he'll come back, it's kind of like a good boxing match, right? Where you go back and forth. And Flores came out and he's tugging at heartstrings on TV, woe is me, I'm the victim and all that. People love that. People love when you say you're the victim. And then the Giants and the NFL came back and they counterpunched and said, well, you're not, you're wrong. And so now Flores has to come back. And so this is how it's going to go. And you combine the statement by the Giants, and there were some others here from John Elway, several other prominent people around the NFL who pushed back against Brian Flores. And so it is a pernicious situation. Think of it like Dunder Mifflin from one of the great TV shows of our lifetime, The Office, also known as Death by 1,000 Paper Cuts, because these little stories are going to keep coming out. Each statement tears away a little bit at the credibility of the lawsuit. Now, again, all of that said, I still maintain that I believe Brian Flores, without having a very good case, is going to end up getting an out-of-court settlement. That it is better for the NFL to cut him a check to go away rather than have to give up the email and the text messages and all that stuff. Although I did have a conversation, I was texting a friend of mine who's pretty connected on this story, and he was pointing out that a lot of the owners in the NFL are so old they don't text, that they really don't know how to use it. And so it's, you think everyone's texting each other, most people are, but some of these NFL owners are just, man, they're hanging out near the pearly gates. So we'll see what happens next, but it is fascinating. The argument, if you break it down to the very core of the argument, Brian Flores' lawsuit, you got the Bellichick stuff, you got the Dolphins told him to tank, but the lawsuit is essentially alleging that there is a concerted effort going back to 1920, over 100 years, where the NFL is intentionally mandating teams not to hire black coaches. It's essentially what Brian Flores' argument is. So how do you prove that? How can you prove that? What are you going to do? You can't say, well, the numbers say there haven't been this many black coaches. The problem is, are we going to have quotas? Is that what you want? You want quotas. See, that's a slippery slope, quotas, where you got to have a certain percentage of this, that, and the other thing, because then you look at the playing field and say, okay, well, there's not a lot of guys of Asian persuasion who are playing in the NFL. And you can go down the list and break it down and say, well, if we're going to have quotas, we got to have it across the board. So do you really want to do that? And so we'll see what comes of it next. But it's going to be interesting, and we will have much more on this as we go forward.